I am overwhelmed with knitting options this spring, I'm not gonna lie. Hi, hello, my name is Allie. I'm an independent graphic designer coming to you from just outside Toronto, and this is my channel where I talk about what I'm knitting, how it's going, and what it's costing me. And today, we're talking about spring knitting plans. As for my mug and tea of the day, this is my mug from Yelena James, out of which I'm drinking barley tea, like straight up just roasted barley from the grocery store, steeped in hot water, because it is late. It's later than I would ideally like to be recording, but you know, it's been a busy couple of weeks and here we are, hello. As for what I'm wearing today, this is my Cloud Bow by Reed Keys layered over my Fausta bralette from Low Key Bold Knit. So I actually finished both of these in the summer of 2024, and as for our cost per wear, the Cloud Bow cost $130 Canadian in total, and I've worn it 10 times, which puts our current cost per wear at $13 Canadian. And as for my Fausta, that was $75 Canadian. I've worn it 14 times, which puts us at $5.35 Canadian. Now, both of these are kind of pieces that I don't like throw on as casually, effortlessly as some of my pullovers. So considering that, I feel like these numbers feel reasonable to me. As always, they're only going to get better with time, and they're both really fun and really cute and I like them, so I feel good about it. So as usual, we're going to start out these seasonal knitting plans by reviewing what my knitting plans were for last season to kind of see how those panned out. But first, I kind of want to give you a little bit of a peek into a little like side quest that I have in my mind coming up for this spring, which is the idea of sort of a knit fix-a-thon. I just kind of have this like accumulating list in my head of projects that I feel like would be a lot better to me with a relatively minor fix. And of course, like I don't super want to do those things, and I've been avoiding doing those things, but I've marked off like a weekend and a few like weeknight evenings surrounding it to make no other plans so that those days can be dedicated to be a knit fix-a-thon, where I basically just want to see how many of these little fixes that I can do within a limited time span. And I just feel like it would be kind of fun to see how much I can get done and just get some of those things off of my list. I'm sure not all of them, but some. I'm actually thinking it'd be really fun to film that sort of vlog style and put that out as a video. So like if you wanted to do a little bit of knit fixing along with me, maybe that's something that could happen. I don't know about you, but when I think about the category of knit fixing, one of the things that comes up for me is the idea of depilling, which actually brings us to the sponsor for today's video, Henson Shaving. Because my favorite way to remove pills from knits is with a safety razor. I've tried different like dedicated depilling tools on my knits, and honestly they all just kind of feel like a waste because nothing has worked as well as this razor. But before I even had hand knits to depill, I've been using a safety razor for over a decade. They look so much nicer than the disposable ones you get at the drugstore. They are so much lower waste, which was what drew me to them in the first place, and the money that they save you is just wild. If you're in the habit of buying those disposable razor cartridges, you know how expensive they are. You know how you kind of end up inevitably trying to like stretch them, like using them longer than you really want to, just because of that price. It's hard not to, but meanwhile they're just getting like less effective and less comfortable every time. But with a safety razor, literally all you're replacing is this little tiny blade. So A, talk about less waste, but B, these literally cost pennies. So you can swap in a new blade as often as you want to, and you'll still be so much better off than whatever you were paying with your previous disposable razor. And you can have a shave that's absolutely as good as you want it to be every single time. So combine fresh blades with the precision engineering that goes into these Henson razors manufactured right here in Canada with a lifetime guarantee. I genuinely don't understand why you would ever go back. They're so easy to use. I know that they look different than disposable razors if that's what you're used to, but when I first got a safety razor like over 10 years ago, there was really no learning curve. You just screw in the blade and you shave as normal, just better. So if you want to give it a try for yourself or your knits, visit hensonshaving.com/AllieMakesEverything or use code AllieMakesEverything to receive 100 free blades with the purchase of a razor. Just make sure both products are in your cart for the code to take effect. Thanks so much to Henson Shaving for sponsoring this video. All right, now let's do it. Let's dig into our recap of how the winter knitting plans went. First order of business is the honorable mentions category, right? I always bring up some patterns in my seasonal knitting plans that realistically, I know I don't have time for these. These are sort of the long list that didn't quite make it to be a finalist of my seasonal knitting plans, but I like to have them there, A, just because I like to share patterns that I thought were really nice and that I was considering, and also because sometimes the actual plans that I make just kind of go awry and something else ends up being subbed in because the thing that I thought I was gonna knit just isn't actually what I wanna knit right now. And so sometimes things get promoted from the honorable mentions. That did not happen this time. Nobody got promoted. As for the first actual concrete plan that I had for this season, first item on my winter knitting plans to-do list was finishing my book club cardigan that I started kind of at the end of my fall knitting. And oof, this is a bad one to start on because I literally did not touch this. I had, as we'll see in a second, kind of a slate of other smaller projects that I wanted to get out for sort of specific deadlines, and was thinking as soon as those are done, they're small, how long can it take? Famous last words. I'll circle back to my book club cardigan. Yeah, it looks the same as it did at the end of my fall knitting. So to refresh all of our memories, including mine. Oh, it's even smaller than I remembered. So this is the start of the back panel. This is sort of the very back of the neck, and then it's increasing out to start to form the back. And wow, yeah, we've got some work to do on this one. I've also definitely been sort of, I would say, working myself up over this one in my head. Like, the longer I spend not working on it, the more intimidating it has become, because when I was working on it, I was definitely aware of, like, okay, this is one of the more, if not probably the most elaborate chart that I've worked on for something. There's just a lot of different cabling stuff going on. And while I was working on it, it wasn't my favorite project I've ever worked on. It was definitely a little bit more intensive than like my ideal, but it was also fine. Like, I was happy to be working on it. It wasn't a big deal. Just because I set it aside, which I did for very specific reasons in favor of another item we'll get to in a second. Before I set it down, it was fine, but now that it's been set down, I am finding it so daunting to think about picking up again. So I kind of feel like this is maybe a lesson to myself. If I'm going to undertake a more ambitious project, maybe we don't do it at a time where it's gonna get put on pause at all, because once I hit pause, it's really hard to hit play. So that's where we're at on this one. Nowhere different than we were in our last seasonal knitting plans. The next thing that I had on my seasonal knitting plans is a check, because this was my golf club cover that I knit for my boyfriend for Christmas. This one came together very quickly. I think I knit this up in maybe 3 days. This one came together super quick. Similarly, I also knit up these cityscape mitts that were in my plans. These ones also came together relatively quickly. So I was just flying along with these little accessories thinking, wow, look, small projects don't take me very long. I will totally have so much time to get back to my book club cardigan. And then the project that is the one that I sort of derailed my book club cardigan for is the All Good Tea, because I was going away, I was going to be traveling, and I knew this book club cardigan is just too elaborate to travel with. And this is where the issue started. And I still think that was true. I'm very glad that I did not try to take the book club cardigan with me. I think I just feel like maybe I should have waited to start the book club cardigan until I was back, because I finished this All Good Tea. I did so much of it on the trip, finished it up when I got back. Great, had a great time with that one. So this one is also a check. And then I was like, okay, it's time to start the last thing on my concrete knitting plans before I get back to my book club cardigan, because this one is a little bit time sensitive. I wanted to knit a pair of pole dance socks by Hypercycloid Designs, and this one is a check by like the skin of our teeth. I just pulled these off the blocking mats last night, so we have a relatively clean slate minus the book club cardigan, little tiny remnant heading into spring knitting. So I'm actually going to circle back to these later in the video as a finished object. And then at the end of my concrete seasonal plans, we have one that was sort of cuspy. It was like, is this a concrete plan? Is this an honorable mention? That's sort of, I'm going to classify it actually as a pipe dream, which is that I feel as concretely that I want to knit it as any of the concrete plans. It was just sort of a question of, will it actually fit into this season or not? Probably not. And in fact, of course it didn't, because I didn't even get through my book club cardigan, let alone starting another thing. But this was my storm sweater by Petite Knit. Yeah, absolutely no, that did not happen whatsoever. So that's where we are coming out of winter knitting. I knit more small things than I usually do, and I knit my whole All Good Tea, and I completely neglected my book club cardigan. So now that we know all that, what is happening this spring? As usual, I have some honorable mentions that I want to get into. These are probably not going to happen. I did think about it. They did end up in my little Ravelry bundle titled Spring Knitting Plans. These are things that I would like to make if I had all the time in the world, and unfortunately I do not. So the first thing in this category is the Yoga Winter Sweater by Nuringarook. So this is a worsted weight sweater that's designed to fit busts between 35 to 61.5 inches. That's allowing for the recommended 12 inches of positive ease. This is a top-down raglan style construction with this really distinctive shaping at the hip, those decreases, and this pattern goes for €6 or about $10 Canadian. Realistically, I just will not have time to get around to this one with the other concrete plans that I have, and sort of by the end of spring it seems like a weird project to start. Way too hot to wear something like this. Also, like, would I even want to be knitting something like this coming out of the spring? I don't know, but I've been wanting to knit this for quite a while, so we'll see if this is one that continues to like float around in the honorable mentions and gets promoted someday. But I have been daydreaming about fibers for this one. Here's my problem. Here's why it's a really good thing that it's not gonna fit into the plans this season, because right now I'm seriously coveting the Ampersand Fibers Garamond worsted, which, first of all, I feel personally attacked by this branding. I'm a graphic designer. Typography is one of my favorite parts of design. So the idea of a line of yarn that is first ampersand, the little and symbol, in my opinion, the most beautiful character in the, not Latin alphabet, but extended Latin character set. All of the yarn under this brand, all of the different weights are named for different typefaces that are classics, that are ones that I love. It's not like they're named after Times New Roman and Arial. They're named after Garamond and Jensen and Avenir. Like, whoever it is doing this knows typography, and they're after my own heart, and it's a problem because these are, I believe, the store brand of an American yarn store, which means that the US dollar does not operate in my favor as a Canadian knitter, plus duties, plus it's a nice yarn. It's an expensive yarn. So I priced out what this was going to cost for me to get, and it was rough even for my discretion, which if you watched my Everything I Knit this year, you know that I am not beyond doing a sweater that costs more than it reasonably probably should. But it was just not feeling like a good idea. And also I've just been, for the last while, trying really hard to source yarn from within Canada to try to avoid all of these exchange rates and duty fee issues. So it's not responsible. However, they have this one color, Oriole. Let me pop it up. Listen, if you've been here a bit, you know that I'm currently in a real phase of orangey reds, and this one is kind of a slightly different take on that than the ones that I have been knitting with recently. Different in a way that I equally love, and think there's something about this particular shade. It's a little bit less saturated, it's a little bit less vibrant, but it's not in the category of terracotta. Like, it's still very much like a red that I think would work so beautifully in this sweater. The idea of it as a turtleneck, it's right up by my face. Oh, I just feel like it would be so good. And I need, if you know of a yarn that I can source from within Canada that is this shade, please let me know, because I need alternatives to make me feel at peace about not buying this yarn, because I'm currently, like, every time I open my Pinterest board where I've like pinned yarn that I might want to use for something at some point, I am feeling like an existential pull of like, I need it, no I can't, no I need it, no I can't. And I don't want to pay what it would cost me to buy the amount of this that I would need, particularly for this really oversized sweater, with the exchange and with the duties. So I need a better option. If you have one, please let me know. Okay, my next honorable mention is the Cat Cowl by Brianna Arlene. Now, I talked in a recent video about being on a little bit of a gift knit kick, and this one falls in that category. So one of my friends, we sort of famously exist in different climates. Not in terms of like where we live. We actually live not far from each other. But in terms of our body temperature, so notoriously anytime we go anywhere together, we are dressed as if for completely different seasons. I get cold really easily. She does not. But this winter, given how absolutely frozen Ontario was for so long, even she admitted, like, I probably need some sort of like neck warming something. She doesn't normally wear any kind of scarf or anything like that. And she was still like, honestly, I don't think I would bother with a scarf. I just don't think I would wear one. Maybe I need like a cowl. And I was like, interesting, particularly because I already had this pattern in my favorites with no sense of like urgency or I'm gonna knit this at any particular point. But I had found this pattern. I had immediately thought of her when I saw this pattern. And now I'm like, well, I need to knit this. I mean, at this point, it won't be ready for her in time for it to be worn this year, but she does have a birthday that's sort of like leading into winter next year. So most likely this will end up being something that I knit later. But if I feel a sudden need to do some color work this spring, it's going to be this one. And I actually already have, I think, the materials that I want to knit this out of. So in my stash, I have this skein from Ginger Twist Studio that I got from my friend Amy when she was doing a D-stash. And I think that this is a fingering weight. So I'd have to hold it double, I believe, because this is a sport weight pattern. We're going to be a little bit off gauge, so it's like, am I working small or am I working big? I would rather double it up and be working with bigger stitches. So I think I would maybe use this alongside like Knitting for Olive Merino, probably held double in probably a light purple, because that would sort of go with the purples and blues in this and one of the colors that she wears all the time. So I think that would be a really nice combo and a great way to use up this yarn that I got from Amy. So this is this is actually an interesting combo. This is 60% superwash merino, 20% yak, 20% silk. So this is their yakety yak 4-ply. So I think this would just be a great excuse to use up this yarn and make really cute gift knit that I think will probably knit up really fast based on my previous experience doing stranded color work, where it just became my whole life until it was done. So it happened quickly. So this is a sport weight pattern that just comes in one size because it's just a cowl. It costs $8 US or about $11.50 Canadian. And one of the things that appeals to me about this cowl is that it's knit in the same general style as the kilometer scarf that I knit recently. So you're knitting it as a tube and then you are just stitching the ends together at the end, except that instead of the kilometer scarf where you're stitching two separate ends so that you have a linear scarf, this one you're stitching the two ends to each other and you're putting a twist in the middle so you get the like Mobius effect. But so it just knits up really nice in the round, and all the floats are going to be hidden on the inside, which also makes it a little bit less concerning as far as trying to make sure your floats are not too long and perfect and whatever. And I think this is going to be a really fun one to knit up. Now, my last honorable mention is a little bit of a vague one, but I've just been thinking about doing another like all mohair top similar to this one, but specifically using, so I suppose not entirely mohair, but the Fua Fua that I used in my kilometer scarf. It's a fluff yarn. It's not all mohair. It's mostly cashmere actually, hence it being quite expensive. Hence also part of why it's not part of this season's seasonal knitting plans, because I'm trying to reel it back a little bit on the yarn spending at the moment. I have a good stash of yarn to work from right now. I have a few projects worth of things, so just trying to not go all in on that right now. But I just have been thinking a lot about wanting to do something with that electric pink candy color in the Fua Fua on its own. I loved it so much held in my kilometer scarf with the other colors I was using, but I think just the idea of a sort of semi-translucent mohairy top in that color would just be so good. The thing though is that my plans for it are very vague, because I haven't found a pattern that's quite felt like, oh, that's it, I want to make that. Because all of the mohair patterns that I've found that I really like are quite similar to the cloud bow, and I'm just trying to find something that's different but that I like as much. Because I am not a person who, if I really like something, I buy it in multiple colors. Like the only times I've ever done that, I've ended up not wearing the subsequent ones as much as I thought that I would, if like at all. I just always end up preferring the original. So I really want it to be something that feels like a different garment than this, and I just haven't quite found the right one. Now, I had originally kind of envisioned like, okay, I have some ideas of a pattern that doesn't exist, but maybe I could create one. Maybe this would be a pattern that I would create. And I was sort of thinking about seeing if I could trial and error create this thing that I have in my mind. But I'll be honest with you, based on my video that just went up on the channel about how I just got a literary agent, which means that I now have to kind of go full force back into my writing in a way that I haven't been in a long time, I don't think that creating a knitting pattern is high on my priority list right now. I definitely want to keep the channel going. Like, I want to be doing my knitting, I want to be doing this, but I think the idea of expanding that into pattern design is something that feels a little bit more on the back burner as an idea for me right now. So with that in mind, I really need a pattern. So if you have a pattern in mind that's recommended for like an all fluff yarn kind of situation, please give me your suggestions. I would love to know which ones I've maybe missed that haven't come up in my searches. And there we go, some sort of all mohair top in my near future, maybe. All right, now let's get into those concrete knitting plans. So first one on this list should not come as any surprise. This is the Book Club Cardigan by Sari Nordland. This is the, I think, third seasonal knitting plans it's been in. So I started it as part of my fall knitting plans. So, you know, maybe by the end of a full year, this will exist. But this is a DK weight pattern by, no, it's not. It's a worsted weight pattern that I am knitting at a DK weight because I like to make my life harder than it needs to be. And this pattern is designed to fit busts from 29.5 to 61 inches, allowing for the recommended positive ease. And this pattern costs €8.90 or about $15 Canadian. So that little blip of a cardigan that I showed you, I'm knitting this out of the La Bien-Aimée Wensley worsted. So this is a 50% Falkland Corriedale, 25% Falkland Merino, and 25% Wensleydale yarn in this gorgeous, say it with me, orange red. So this is in the colorway Coquelicot, and I picked this up during their anniversary sale where they had, I think it was like a 30% discount. So even with that, it was not cheap, in part because this was coming directly from La Bien-Aimée, so France to Canada. Duties, everybody's here. This is why I'm trying to buy yarn from within Canada right now, okay? But so since this was not from within Canada, this was $276.30 Canadian, that is, for the actual yarn purchase. And then there was a $44.01 duty charge for a grand total of $320.31 Canadian for the, how many skeins of this did I buy? 6 maybe? The amount that I determined that I needed for this cardigan, that it has now been so long since, I think it was like last May, which, you know, I've used a little bit of one skein for that bit that you've seen so far. So that's one of the longer, like, entering stash to off the needles that I've had for yarn in my collection. And I love this yarn. I'm so excited to have a cardigan made of this yarn. I just have to, like, de-terrify myself of it and dive back in. And now I'm sort of in a funny spot because, like I said, I just finished those socks, like put them on the blocking mat last night. So I'm like, oh God, is it time now? Or do I start my next? No, I think we need to dive. I just need to sit down and get reacquainted with it. I just need to spend like an hour working on it, looking at the chart, getting it back in my head. Because where I left it off, it really wasn't bad. I didn't have to watch the chart that closely. I kind of like understood what was going on. I had like memorized what was going on enough that I could be like, okay, we're on this part now. Okay, I know how that works. So I just need to get back to that point. Would love to see this one moving along a little bit faster in the near future for all of the reasons we've already discussed. I just really want this sweater. This one feels a lot like a product knit, and the process, just gotta be brave. We can do it. I know that once I get back to it, it'll be so fine. I have just like made it a thing in my head. And I wish that this wasn't such a busy weekend for me. The fact that I just finished those socks, like I currently have nothing on the needles, which means that I want to pick that back up and get into it. But I'm just like, do I have the headspace this weekend to do, or even just the time at all? Like realistically, I don't know that I'm going to be doing any knitting this weekend, which I don't love that for me. But like if I had something mindless that I could pick up for like 10 minutes, I would probably do that at some point. This is super not a 10-minute project, but it will be a project that happens because I'm simply too stubborn for it not to be. Now, the next project in my concrete knitting plans list, the one where for a second I'm like, should I do this one before I go back to the book club cardigan? But no, we're not going to. But this is another gift knit that is on my radar. So I was talking about the cowl earlier as a gift knit for a friend. I have sort of 3 of my best friends are from high school. Like we have been friends for longer than I feel like should be possible for high school friends, because in my head I'm still like 20 years old. Fun fact, I'm not. So I've been thinking about wanting to do something for each of those 3 friends. So the cat cowl is one of them. And one of those friends is my friend Amy, who's been referenced on the channel before. She is a knitter. And because she's a knitter, it kind of feels like a different proposition to knit a gift knit for a knitter, because for the other 2, I'm like, I'm gonna make something that I think they will like. It'll be a surprise. They're not even gonna know I'm gonna knit them anything. They don't knit. They don't watch a knitting podcast. They will not know about any of this. So easy peasy. And so the fact that they're just gonna get a surprise knit gift, like it also just feels like the stakes are lower for it to be something that, oh my God, they will absolutely love and wear this all the time, because there will just be an innate factor of like, oh, like surprise, like something was knit for me and that's nice. You know, like it's okay for me if that's most of it, and if it's something that they really super love and get a lot of wear out of it, that's kind of a bonus. But it feels different making something for a knitter, because like Amy's gonna watch this whole process. Hi, Amy. And I just kind of felt like there's kind of a unique opportunity here, because I feel like all knitters have different preferences in what we like to work on. And Amy and I in particular, It's so funny to me how well we get along as friends because we have such different preferences in most things. Like, we have a lot of common interests with very different approaches to those interests. Like, we both love to read. We have completely different tastes in books. We do not take each other's book recommendations. We both love to knit. We have different preferences of what kinds of things we like to knit. So I asked Amy, is there something that you have really, that you like want to knit, like you want to have it, you want to have knitted, but you super don't actually want to knit it, that maybe I would like to knit for you? And so she thought about this for a few days, and what she came back with is a Musselburgh hat, which if you've been watching lately, you will know I'm so delighted about, because turns out I love a Musselburgh hat. I loved the kilometer scarf because it felt like the Musselburgh hat without even having to do the crown shaping. It was just Musselburgh forever. This was a great surprise to me. I saw so many people knitting the Musselburgh before I knit one, and I was like, it seems super boring and tedious. I don't know, the idea of knitting a hat doesn't appeal to me. Turns out it's my favorite thing. So if Amy wants a Musselburgh, Amy will have a Musselburgh. I'm so happy. So this is the Musselburgh hat pattern by Isolde Teague. This is a very flexible weight pattern. It works for anywhere from fingering to DK weight yarn. Comes in sizes from baby to adult extra large. This pattern costs 6 Great British pounds, or about $12 Canadian, but I already have it because I already knit one. So that's a nice bonus. And as for materials, I don't have the yarn for this one yet, but I do know what I'm planning to use. So I was talking to Amy about fiber preferences, especially for hat, like it's gonna be like on skin. So she wants to do Santa's Garden Sunday, which great, love working with Santa's Garden Sunday, and we're looking at the color olive green. I basically just need to acquire this yarn, and then we decide how this does or does not interact with the book club cardigan. So I do think that my first priority needs to be getting reacquainted with book club cardigan. Then the question becomes, given its complexity, do I allow the Musselburgh to be a side project? Now, if you were privy to the process of my kilometer scarf, which, speaking of recapping my seasonal knitting plans, that was not one of them. That came out of nowhere. I went rogue and I knit that. And when I did that, when I cast it on, I imagined that it would be worked up concurrently with my book club cardigan as like a way of taking a break from it. Reader, she did not touch the book club cardigan. She just frantically knitted on the kilometer scarf for like 2 weeks. Now, in my defense, there were reasons why that was a thing that I could knit and the book club cardigan weren't at that time. However, like, do I trust that I could cast on the Musselburgh alongside the book club cardigan and not have it end up taking over? And yet again, I am back to making no progress on book club cardigan. I don't know. I do not know if I can be trusted with having a second project on the needles. TBD. I will report back in my next video. I should have progress on the book club cardigan. I should also have some intel on what I have learned as far as whether or not that's a feasible concept. The next thing on my concrete knitting plans list, it's a storm sweater. A storm sweater that won't die. It's still here, and in fact, it's a more concrete plan than ever because I have yarn for it now. It's real. I was not really planning to buy this yarn quite this soon. I feel like I have the yarn already for my book club cardigan. I have the yarn that I got in Vietnam. I would rather not be acquiring more yarn at this moment. Like, I have my book club cardigan to do. I prefer to be closer to the end of a project before I'm buying yarn for the next one to leave myself room to change my plans and whatever. But Slender Yarn had a Valentine's Day sale for 14% off, and it felt silly to pass that up, knowing that I, for months now, have been planning that this was the yarn that I wanted to buy to make this sweater. That plan hasn't changed. I'm quite certain that that plan is going to stay the same, so it seemed silly to not buy it for 14% off when I could. So here it is. So the pattern that I want to make with this is the Storm Sweater by Petite Knit. This pattern is designed to fit busts between 28.25 to 61.75 inches, allowing for the recommended positive ease. The pattern costs 50 Danish kroner, or about $11 Canadian. And I'm thinking that I want to knit this one really extra big even. This is designed to have a lot of positive ease, but I just want to be swimming in it. I recently bought like a really oversized sweatshirt and I've just been living in it. I'm like, oh, oh, maybe I need to knit some things that are like extremely oversized on me. So that's my plan for this one. I want to just be engulfed within it. This is their Sunday Morning DK, which is a 75% BFL, 25% Masham. I'm not familiar with this breed of sheep, but look at the color. This is the colorway Dream State. It's this dreamy, very aptly named sort of dark greeny blue. It's very rich, which addresses my complaint with a lot of sort of dark tealy colors. They sometimes feel to me like they have a very like milky white base underneath them. They just don't really have the depth of color that I want. This one does. So I'm very excited about this. I think it's going to be so beautiful when I finally get around to it after the book club cardigan. After. So to knit my extremely oversized sweater of my dreams, I picked up 7 skeins of this, which ran me $251.70 Canadian. That was with a savings of $36.26 because of the sale, and shipping was free because it was over the threshold. I think this sweater is so nice, and I'm excited to try it. Like, I've never done a sweater with this sort of texture, the sort of texture that's just all knits and purls. I think that it will be a really fun thing to do after the book club cardigan, because it will have this like interest of the all over texture, but it will be much more, I think, simpler row by row in the chart to follow. I'm kind of anticipating that it might feel similar to doing stranded color work, where it's just sort of this very repetitive pattern all across a row, and then in the next row you're doing like a different but also similar combination, you know? I could see that being very fun and kind of like popcorny to work on. So I'm looking forward to casting this on eventually. My last concrete knitting plan is, I mean, less concrete than that category name would suggest. This is sort of in the realm of the like mohair top question mark. I want to knit a pair of fingerless gloves. Here's why it's a question mark. I have like a very specific idea in my head of what I want to knit, and I have not yet found the exact pattern for it. So my current plan is to do a bit of a Frankenstein between 2 patterns. But if you know of a pattern that already is what I am trying to accomplish, please let me know and you can save me some trouble. So here's my vision, okay? I'm thinking just plain stockinette, fingerless gloves, but I want it to be double knit from like a fingering weight yarn. Okay, so we have that double, it's sort of like a DK weight, but with smaller stitches. And part of that is the idea of the 2 layers of fabric I like for the sort of added wind resistance that would offer from the way they would sort of naturally end up like a little bit offset from each other and just sort of let less cold come in through the space in and between the stitches. But also because I really want these, I'm just envisioning them really clean and minimal, meaning I don't want any ribbing on them, and the double knitting will allow for not needing ribbing and having them not roll. So as for those 2 patterns I'm currently looking at, okay, for the general like look and construction, I'm looking at the Last Minute Hand Stole Pin by Suzanne Mueller. I really love the way that the thumb gusset looks, the way it kind of increases across the whole palm. I think that's so beautiful. I really love everything about these, except that I would love to do a version of these without the ribbing by doing it all in double knitting. And I don't at this stage know enough about construction and double knitting to know offhand how to translate this into a double knitted version and to do those increases, but I think that I could figure that out using this other pattern, the double knit snowflake fingerless gloves from Tracy Lemming. Okay, so this one, you can see this has so much of what I want, right? You can see that it's the crisp all over, like double knit stockinette. I will just ignore the color work part. That's just not what I'm trying to do. But I just don't love the way that the thumb looks on this one. The thumb is just a little like branch off of the side. So I really want to do a version that has those increases that are more like the other one. But I think that this pattern, which is free by the way, which makes it easier to like roughly consult, I'm hoping that from that I can gain an understanding of how the shaping of the thumb gusset works, and I can just modify like the positioning and the numbers of those to look more like the other pattern. I hope. Now, complicating this further, because we know I love to complicate things, is that the Suzanne Mueller pattern, it's a DK weight pattern. Because I want to do double knitting, I don't think I want to do double knitting with DK. It's just funny because DK stands for double knit. I don't want to double knit yarn. That just seems like it will be bulky. Is that literally what DK weight held together would be? Is that bulky? I don't think so. Maybe Erin. I'm really bad with yarn weights. But, so I think this means that I need to sort of translate that into working with the numbers for fingering weight. So my gauge will be off. we're just gonna make this hard for ourselves in every way we possibly can. So again, if you have a pattern that is doing all the things I'm talking about doing, but is already a pattern, please do report back. But in the event that such a thing does not exist, I'm looking at this Suzanne Mueller pattern. This has sizes small, medium, and large. It costs €336 or about $566 Canadian. And as for materials, I'm planning to knit this out of leftovers. So I have some of this Santa's Garden Sunday left over from my All Good Tea in the color 4018 that I am obsessed with, again in the, say it with me, orange red family. And I feel like this would go so well with my kilometer scarf and the red hat that I usually wear with it. I have been getting a lot of wear out of the fingerless gloves that I knit, I think a couple of years ago now. I think it was early on in my channel, my modified from Bridge arm warmers fingerless gloves. And I'm just interested in the idea of ones that are knit out of a finer weight, because those were, I think, a bulky. So they are both bulky, but I'm interested in the idea of a fabric that is not as thick, but is sort of denser in the way that a double knit fabric would be. So I'm curious if a smaller yarn but knit at a denser gauge can kind of achieve the same or even more warmth with sort of a smaller footprint in terms of the bulk that it adds to your body. I don't know, I just think it will be cute. And we're gonna see how it goes. And I think it will be a really great way to use up this leftover yarn. I have this one and I have almost an entire other skein left over. And then not a specific pattern or project, but the last general thing on my concrete knitting plans is that knit fix-a-thon that I mentioned. So I have jotted down a list of the things that I would like to fix. I'm gonna rattle them off. You're quickly gonna hear that not all these are gonna happen in a few days, but let's see what our options are. So we can depill like everything. We can attach tags to the finished objects that don't have them yet, which is most of them. I've been doing a very bad job about attaching tags to things as I finish them, despite the fact that I've had those tags for like 2 years at this point. I find it very tedious to apply them and also frustrating, because try as hard as I might to get them to go on straight, and I like pin them straight and they seem straight, and then suddenly I'm done and they're not straight. So I don't like things that I feel like I just can't get the result that I want. So I think this is the thing that I just need to like do a lot more, and I'll get better at it and they'll start being straighter, and I just have to like deal with it in the meantime. Anyway, I also need to fix the cuff on my quilted sweater coat. Something like broke there and it started to unravel. Need to fix that. I also want to lengthen the sleeves on my Tucker fade. I also want to shorten the sleeves on my Rivendell sweater. Also maybe lengthen the sleeves on my Serendipity. If I have enough yarn left, I need to kind of look into this. I kind of want to reknit the hem on my Laurel Dalgard sweater. I think that if it were a longer ribbed hem and also a split hem, I think that would make this even more something that I would enjoy wearing. I really want to redo the neckline on my squiggle sweater. It's just stitched down so tight and it's hard to get over my head, and it sits like this. Like when I'm wearing it, I am very aware of it, and that means that I don't wear it as much as I would like to, considering how much I love the look and the fit of this sweater in every other way. I also would like to add, I think I want to try adding some elastic to the cuffs of my Lakes cardigan. I just find them a little bit too wide and in the way sometimes. And last but not least, I would like to felt a sole for my reading socks, because I have now, after putting off this knit fix for a very long time, I have now darned the bottom of my reading socks multiple times, and they have reworn through, not in the spots that I had darned, but in just other more spots, like right away. And I just feel like I just can't keep going like this. I can't wear them for 2 days and then have to darn them more and wear them for 2 days and darn them more. It's just not feasible. These need some kind of sole, because this yarn is not really designed for this. I have more of the yarn that I made them out of, so I'm kind of thinking, can I basically just knit like a long oval of this yarn that I felt and cut into the shape of the bottom of this and stitch it on so it has a felted sole, kind of like a slipper, and maybe that would hold up better. That's gonna be some real trial and error, but I think it could be done. So that is my list of knit fixes that I'm hoping to do. Yeah, I don't think that's possible to get all those done in a few days, but I can probably get a decent amount of them done, and it's a nice sort of menu to be able to, like, as I finish one, kind of look at it and just decide what I feel like doing next based on how that last one went and what sort of momentum I want to keep going with. So we'll see. We'll see how far I get with those. So that's it. Those are all of my seasonal knitting plans, which means it's time to circle back to the finished object that wraps up my winter knitting. So that That is the Pole Dance Socks by Hypercycloid Designs, and ta-da, I have them. They're so cute. So let me tell you about this pattern really quickly. So this is the Pole Dance Socks by Hypercycloid Designs. This is a fingering weight pattern and it is free, so that's fun. And this pattern is designed to work with whatever your like magic number of sock stitches is, so it's very flexible and customizable in terms of sizing. So I knit this up out of a combination of Gauge Dye Works self-striping yarn, which is of course the blue stripy part. So that is in their Aquamarine March Birthstone colorway, and then I knit that with the Sanus Garn Sisu in the colorway 1032. So I got the Sisu from the Knitting Loft, and I got the Gauge Dye Works direct from Gauge Dye Works. So in terms of cost, we're looking at $11.24 for the Sisu. That one I had free shipping on because I ordered it with yarn for a different project. And the Gauge Dye Works was $45.63 Canadian plus $12 in shipping. So that one was obviously the pricier half of these socks. But in total, with the free pattern, we're looking at a total project cost of $68.87 Canadian. And if you are eagle-eyed when it comes to yarn in knitting, these are not the same weight of yarn, which made for an interesting process. That was a real rookie error on my part. I had used the Sisu when I knit the Musselburgh for my nephew, and I knew that it was sport weight, but then when I was working on this, and so the sock yarn is fingering weight, something in my head conflated sock yarn and sport yarn, even though sport weight is a bit thicker than fingering weight. So I had to start these socks multiple times. I think that in total, I believe that I knit like 2 whole pairs of socks if you add up all the various efforts. So I cast this on February 4th. They came off of the needles on February 27th, which is so much longer than I thought these would take. Like, this is where I really thought I was gonna get back to the book club cardigan this season. And then these socks took me like almost a month because of all of the like back and forth and restarting and figuring things out. So I'm gonna walk you through the whole story of these, but first I'm gonna put them on and show you what they actually look like on a human foot. These are so fun. I love the way that they like spiral around the foot. I love the way that the 2 colors are like in opposite positions. There's 2 different ways that I've seen people knit these socks in terms of the project photos. So a lot of them have them be like symmetrical. So basically this gray part would also be gray, here. I really liked the version where they're offset like this, and this is actually the version, like the combination of position of the colors, I guess, that my aunt had sent me a picture of originally when she was like, oh my god, could you knit these? And I was like, noted for your birthday. So these are just, they're so fun. Blocking was so important on these ones because when these first were done, they could not like figure out how to exist. Like, you could not get them to lay flat because of the way that the fabric spirals around. Like, just all of the different seams and all of the places all the way around just don't let it lay flat. So blocking was really critical to get these ones to like lay like a flat sock when they're not on a human foot. And even when they were kind of like struggling to like know what to do with themselves. But now that they're done and now that they're blocked, I think they're super cool. So here they are in all of their glory. They're so much fun. Each side is sort of like opposite of the other because of the way that they spiral around. The 2 different sides where the fabric joins sort of look different because you're doing different like, you know, like knit 2 together versus like slip knits or whatever in different places. So some of them look better than others. Like I feel like this side looks a little bit more Frankenstein-y than this side does. I think that there's a degree of like, you know, maybe I'm just not as good at this as I could be, but I feel like there's so much to like look at in the spiral design of the stripes and everything that it's easy to kind of overlook the imperfections in the way that these things are joined. But I'm finding it really hard to like hold these up in a way where I feel like it really like shows you. I don't know. I hope that you get the idea of what's going on here. I feel like it's a little bit weird to try to show in 2 dimensions, but they're very neat. The construction of these was very interesting. So basically you knit your cuff in the round, and then you put half the stitches on hold and you're just knitting one of the colors. So say we start out with the blue side and you're knitting this piece that ends up going on a diagonal because you are doing an increase on one side and a decrease on the other over and over and over. So it creates the effect of this diagonal piece that's like spiraling around. Once you get down to like where you would start the toe, you pause and you pick up stitches all the way up and back down that diagonal piece. And then you're like knitting back and forth in between those to fill in the second color side. So like in this case, the gray side. And I don't know if there was a better way to do this. In the pattern, it kind of sounded like it thought I could do this with just 2 circular needles. I found that I needed DPNs in there to be picking up stitches the way that I needed to on each end as I went, and to have the room to move the needles. Like I couldn't knit when it was just 2 circulars and like they were each like way down the length of the sock. It was very chaotic looking when I was working on these, but it did the job. It was fine. It was not particularly annoying to work on. It actually really reminded me of when you're doing a cardigan and you're like picking up to knit a button band afterward. It felt like a really similar process in terms of like, first you pick up all the stitches and then kind of at the end of each row you have to do some sort of like joining thing. That was sort of how it felt. So let's now go through the story of these and why they took so many tries. So I initially cast on with 68 stitches. Hi Copper. I am not a very experienced sock knitter. I don't have like a go-to stock stitch number, and this is also where the gauge. So I was initially working on these with the Santa's Yarn Sisu and with 1 single strand of that fingering weight self-striping yarn. And I mean, I kind of immediately had a slight issue, which is that the pattern calls for 2.25 millimeter needles, which is significantly smaller than my smallest needles. My set only goes down to 3.25. And I was kind of like, well, I've knit with fingering weight yarn before, and I didn't have smaller needles then, and that produced garments that I was happy with. Also, like, do I even want to knit on a 2.25 millimeter needle? Like, that kind of sounds awful. So I think I'm just gonna try the 3.25. Like I said, I've knit things on that before. Great. And multiple things happened here. So one is that you'll probably see this one coming. They turned out bigger than I thought they were gonna be. But also, I just wasn't happy with the way that the fingering weight yarn looked on that needle size. It just felt too open. And I could also see the contrast between that yarn and the Sisu, realizing, oh no, this is a sport weight yarn, that's a thicker yarn. These two halves look very different from each other. Now the problem that I got too far in before I figured that out, because since you knit like all of one color and then you join for the second, I had knit all of the fingering weight part. The gauge issue of the fingering weight on that needle wasn't immediately an issue to me. It more just kind of revealed itself once it was in comparison to the Sisu. So I knit all of the fingering weight one, and then just because of like what like I was trying to watch like Traders or something, I don't know. And I was like, I don't think that I can wrap my head around with and fuss with knitting the second half of this sock right now. What I should do is put this one aside and start the second sock. Like I did part 1 of sock 1, let's now do part 1 of sock 2. So I started part 1 of sock 2, meaning that I was now doing the same thing I just did, but with the gray instead of with the blue. So I finished that. So I finished part 1 of both socks, and I was looking at them and I was like, these look very different. This was when I realized the full force of my error. So again, I knit half of each sock. So we've now knit a whole sock. And I'm going, oh no. Oh no. So again, silly mistake that I forgot that Sisu was sport, which is different than sock. Silly. So that meant that I kept the part 1 of sock 2, the one that was all in Sisu. But I was like, okay, I think I need to reknit sock 1 part 1, the one of the fingering weight yarn, by holding that fingering weight double, which should be fine because like I think one of these skeins is usually intended for a pair of socks, and I'm functionally only knitting half of a pair of socks with it. So I should have enough to hold it double. So I restarted sock 1 part 1 with this yarn held double. And I was much happier with how that fabric looked. It's still not a perfect match in gauge for the Sisu. Now this is actually thicker, like this held double is a bit thicker than the Sisu, but they're close enough that it looks fine. Like they both feel like adequate sock density, fabric thickness. So then I started part 2 of sock 1, so the sock that was blue, I started adding the gray. And when I got a little bit down the way in that, I went, oh no, these are so much bigger than I thought they were going to be. So part of this is that when I had come up with that 68 stitch number, that was based on the idea that I was knitting at a fingering weight, which I no longer am. I'm knitting at a sport plus something that seems to be a bit thicker than a sport when I hold the fingering weight double. And I realized that a really weird thing was happening in the way, just the optical illusion of the way that I was understanding this diagonal fabric. I think that the brain, at least my brain, has a tendency to try to measure that by registering a line that is like straight across the diagonal. Like if we straighten this out to be vertical and then draw a straight line across it, like that's what my brain is like measuring. But in fact, when we actually respect the fact that it's a diagonal, if we look at one edge stitch to the other edge stitch of the same color, that's in fact much wider than the distance that my brain wants to register this as, because the distance it wants to register it as is a diagonal to the stitches, which is not reflective of the actual circumference of the sock. All that cares about is the stitches. So it just turns out that what I thought I was seeing is not what was actually happening because of this weird diagonal illusion. So that meant that after I had knit half of a sock, another half of a sock, plus started the second half of a sock, plus don't forget I'd also already knit half of the sock, I had to rip out all of it and start again with fewer stitches for the sock. So for those keeping score at home, how many socks is that I've knit now? It's a lot of sock. So I started over from scratch with 56 stitches cast on instead of 68, holding that fingering weight double, and this was the final product of that. At last, I knit them successfully. It just took a few tries. And not even like, I think I anticipated going into this that I would have a little bit of a struggle with these, but I thought it was gonna be because of the funny spiral structure. Like I thought maybe I would have a hard time understanding that or just would make weird mistakes. I actually found that so simple. As someone who has horrible spatial reasoning, I didn't need to understand how it worked. I just needed the instructions to be clear and I could follow them and it could magically materialize, and it did. It's much easier than I envisioned that it would be. So I hope that my explanation earlier of how the construction sort of works makes sense to you. But if it doesn't, I do think that this is a simpler pattern than it looks. So if this is something that you're interested in and you know how to do like make ones and knit two togethers, you'll be so fine. Now, I do want to say for the record, I am generally a very large proponent of knitting things two at a time. I wasn't even knitting these purely two at a time in this case, like in that they weren't on the same needle set. I thought that would be a recipe for disaster because of the unusual construction of these. I do maintain that would be true. I do think it would also become impossible once you got to the part where you're adding the second half of the socks. But I was sort of knitting them two at a time in that, like I said, I knit part one of sock one and then part one of sock two. So I was sort of doing each step on one sock right after the other. And that really bit me in the butt this time, because if I had just knit all of sock one, I would have realized the sizing issue before I knit half of sock two. So will that change my behavior in the future? I don't think so. I do think that the pros of two at a time vastly outweigh the cons for me, but the cons came for me this time. Also, on the toe of these, the pattern gives you a couple of options. You can do either a wedge toe or a star toe. It gives directions for both. So I did the star toe mostly just because to do the wedge toe, it's like because of the spiraling, you kind of have to like put the sock on without the toe and figure out like where does the heel sit, and therefore where do you want your beginning of round to be for the toe so that the side decreases to create the wedge are in the right place and aren't like weirdly on top of your foot. And then you have to like knit over to there. It just seemed complicated to me. It was prone for error. Like if I kind of thought this is the stitch it should be in, and then I accidentally, like I got it wrong and it really should have been like a stitch or two over, and now it's sort of crooked on your toe. It just seemed like a toe that was more symmetrical all the way around would be a safer call for this kind of unusual construction. So that's what I did. It was very simple. I'd never done a star toe before. It's just like divide it into quadrants and decrease at the start of each quadrant. Very simple. Also, when I was done these, I was surprised at the yarn leftovers in that Sisu had almost none. I think I have like a tiny little ball of it left from some that I ripped out from one of my previous failures with these socks. But I actually still had some of the self-striping yarn left and like a decent amount of it. So considering that I was holding it double, granted it is less than half of the socks because I made these have matching toes and matching cuffs. Those are both in the Sisu, but I did not expect to have as much of a self-striping left as I do. So like, I don't think it's enough to even knit like another accessory out of, but maybe enough to be like a contrast color in something, but it's kind of an awkward quantity for like a self-stripe. I don't know. If you have a recommendation for like a small amount of self-striping yarn, please let me know. But yeah, these are my pole dance socks by Hypercycloid Designs, and I will be shipping these off to my aunt for her birthday very soon. All right, that is it for my winter knitting wrap up, my spring knitting plans. I want to do off the needles today, but I just like, this has simply been too much and I just can't. So it's gonna have to wait until next time, but it's like, I don't like it because I do have multiple books to talk about. So there's, you know, suspense, things to look forward to for next time. But I do want to know, how did your winter knitting plans go? What do you have in mind for spring knitting? Let me know what you're thinking. And as always, thank you so much for coming to knit with me. If you'd like to be here next time, I hope you'll consider subscribing if you haven't already. But if you already have, you're my favorite. And I'll see you next time.